Welcome, everyone, to the next episode of Rebecca and Rebecca, where we love books. And I'm Rebecca Reed from Indiana, and this is my partner in crime, Rebecca Yager from Dallas, Texas.
Hey,
And we have
Rebecca.
this is a great episode. This is my favorite thing is when I make Rebecca read things in the fantasy sci-fi genre because I love it and she's never read it, and it's like, oh my gosh, what are you
Um,
missing? Well, she's liking it now because I've made her read a few, and I think we're going to enjoy talking to our author Emily Haney, or EA Hendryx, I guess is the
It's
she
both.
has too many names for me to
we'll get
remember
into
them.
that.
So
We'll get into
we'll
you.
talk about that later, but that's just a preview of what's to come. So, Rebecca, you want to let everybody know about our author?
Yes, our author today is EA Hendryx, is an author, graphic designer, photographer, and podcaster living in Indiana with her husband, two dogs, and a cat named Pages. Love that. She writes fiction in multiple genres and spends more time on Instagram than she probably should. She grew up on a steady diet of Star Trek and Nancy Drew and believes that every idea is better in space. You can connect with her at eahcreative.com, and we'll repeat that website later on. But Emily, welcome. We're glad you're here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be chatting with you ladies, especially after we did our photo shoot. Was it last year? Yeah, at ACFW in
Yeah,
person, which is always fun. So
it is. But yes, Emily is our photographer, by the way. So
Yes.
our
Yeah, she's
website.
fantastic.
Oh,
Yeah,
thank you. Thank you.
she made us look better than we are, I think.
Multi-talented, right? Multi-talented.
I
Creative.
do wear a lot of hats. I will say
Yeah.
that.
Yeah,
Maybe
you
too
do.
many
You're not a boring
sometimes.
person.
I'm not.
So, all right. Well, since you're not a boring person, we wanted to know what would surprise people to learn about you besides all your many hats that you wear.
Yeah, I think a lot of the times people don't realize that I actually have a degree in music, not in writing or anything associated with writing, actually. I have a degree in vocal performance and youth ministry. It was like a combined major that
Oh,
I did. So that it makes sense when you think about me and how I love to write young adult, among other genres, because I did work with youth for about like between 8 to 12 years, like kind of off and on in some places, but that has been a big passion of my life. So I like how those things kind of come together. And I'm looking forward to in this year actually doing something writing wise, but with some music involved. So, it's a little spoiler, I guess, but it has nothing to do with my young adult stuff. So there's that next hat, right?
ooh, it's teasing
Yeah,
us
just a
with
little.
that. So, when you thought about your hopes and dreams for growing up, was it related to music?
It was kind of hand in hand with music and with writing. So I come from a musical family. My father is an excellent piano player, and he orchestrates things for our church and for programs he used to put on that I've been a part of for forever. And my mom plays cello and she sings. And my dad plays actually multiple instruments. So when it was sixth grade, I think I said, "It's time that I learned an instrument." I just sat down at the dinner table and said that. So I picked up the flute, and that was my main instrument for many years until I added guitar because you can't really sing and play flute at the same time. It's not the same. But in addition to that, I did write a lot of my own songs. So there was always this kind of creativity between what writing looks like in addition to music, but I kind of started to think, well, what if I made these stories bigger than just like, those angsty little tween and teen words that you put together about how the world is against you and all those things. So I really kind of started leaning into that more in high school, and writing creatively and did a lot of NaNoWriMo and things like that until I got a little older and realized maybe I want to make this something that I actually do. So, yeah.
You seriously must have a creative brain between graphic design and
Yeah.
music and writing
Pretty
and
much. I would say like I'm always thinking creatively, and I'm very thankful that I married a man who thinks very logically and like math. I am not a math person. I joke that I can like count to 12 because of music and that's where it ends. But yeah, I definitely think about things in the creative capacity. And my parents have been always so amazing to really encourage that, which I think is such a beautiful thing because it wasn't like I decided to go to college and study something and they were like, oh, you should maybe think how you're going to make money, to do these things or, with these things. But
Mhm.
instead, they were just like, if that's where you feel like God is leading you, go. We support that. So I definitely attribute a lot of who I am today and the things that I do today to just their encouragement, which is really awesome. So they're great, great people.
Yeah, you have spectacular parents.
I do. I really do.
It sounds like so. All right, so you write in different genres, but in general, and maybe we ought to maybe direct this towards Suspended in the Stars, but in general, how long does it take you to write a book? Mhm.
It does depend. So I'll backtrack a little bit. In that in between time when I knew I loved to write, but I didn't know how I was going to make it happen or what that took. I mean, I did eventually find ACFW and connected with them, and that really helped like the professional side of things. But I think maybe around the same time or a little bit before, I started to do a lot of ghostwriting. And so that was where I would write for a client who would then turn around and publish it on Amazon. Usually it was a lot of like very fast jobs that were a little shorter in nature. So you're not talking like a thick book. It's more of like a short novel, 50, we would say 40 to 50,000 words, give or take. And they would want it in a quick turnaround time. So to do that, it was really fun because it's fiction and I think really fast. So I could translate the thinking to my fingers and type pretty fast. So on a good month or whatnot, I could probably kick out a short novel in like 10 days if I needed to. I don't love to do that, but I could do it. And it wouldn't be terrible, which is good. But obviously it took like, years of doing this to get to that point. So now with my like actual, my own books in a more of a professional capacity, I take more time. I could write that fast, but I don't prefer to if I can help it. And if we're talking about something like a science fantasy like Suspended in the Stars, or even something along the lines of like any kind of fantasy, really, you can go both of those genres. But that takes more. It takes more thought. It takes more world building. It takes more of me thinking through things because even if it's fictional, I mean, you guys are writers, like it still has to make sense. Even though it's fantasy, it's still like there's maybe
Yeah.
like an element of magic, but the magic still, it can't just like solve every problem. So
Mhm.
I would say, it's a long answer to your question. It'll probably take me about 2.5 months to write roughly 90 to 100,000 words. Should everything go as planned, because I'm working on book 2 in this series, and I've already done the first 50K, and that was through NaNoWriMo. So I can do probably the next 50 in a month of just dedicated writing, but that means that I've done my planning too, so I don't really book in those days. So a couple of months, 3 months or something. And that's not typical from the people that I talk to. They're like, what? It takes me a year. That's great. I just do it differently. Like if I don't get it
Mhm.
out, it's not going to be good. It's going to be more like disjointed. So that would be probably where I end up. If it's romance, I can tend to write it a little faster because it's more contemporary in nature. So yeah.
I think that's something we've talked about in the past as writers, and with readers is that every writer's got to find their own way of doing it in their own niche, and it may take some longer and some can write quicker. And
Yeah.
there's no wrong way as long as you're
Yeah.
getting the words out to our readers.
Yeah. There was one year I
Your book.
wrote 1 million words ghostwriting, and that was too many words. Like I knew at the end of that year, I mean, hey, I needed to eat, I needed to pay bills, so I get why I did it. But I look back and I'm like, okay, I know I can do that. But I've actually been talking about this on my own podcast. Like, is that my best capacity? No, not really. Just because I'm not going to be able to do anything else. And I have another business and like I have a husband and dogs and a cat and like all the things that take focus and attention in a good way. So I try to scale back and not tell myself like, well, but you could do this. Like, yes, I could, but I probably shouldn't.
Well, and Rebecca, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just gonna say that, and you're right. We have, I think with every author we talk to, it's so interesting to see how the different creative paths that people take. And, there's some writers who are, they want that for rough draft and then they, go back and edit later. There's others who edit as they go, and when they're done, they're pretty much done, but it takes longer that way. So it's, you know, there is no one way to get there, but I'm a lot more like you. I tend to write quickly. I
Mhm.
want to get it all out there, and then I'll go back and like make sense of the mess, I
Mhm.
guess.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I think, with fantasy, there's so many things that you have to work through. And since you're inventing a lot of it, you have to figure it out yourself first because nobody can tell you like, oh, it should be this way. Well, who
Yeah.
knows what it should be
Yeah.
like because it's your invention.
Mhm.
And so you have to figure it out. And sometimes you just have to write through that and to see where the issues are
Mhm.
at least that's how it is for me. I don't know
Mhm.
if
I
it works
think
that
one
way
of the
for you.
hardest things is remembering. It's like, "Wait, how did I say that this worked again?"
Right?
Especially for things like tech, like new technology and things like that, like, you need to, like I said, put rules on it because I think it's the same way that you would deal with any kind of magic system, and that is a challenge. It's like, "Wait, okay, so if this does this, like, wait, how did I say that that worked again?" Like, it's a lot. It's a lot to keep track of in my brain.
Yeah.
Do you have a system for keeping track? Do you have a
I
notebook
should.
or?
Well, so I love to write with Scrivener. That's probably my
Ah,
go-to. It's so funny.
mhm,
I have like different brains, I guess, because when I write my contemporary romance, not all the time, but most of the time, I have tended to do it in Word. And just I think it puts my brain in a ghostwriting situation and I
mhm,
just think, write the book. And those tend to come up very clean. Like I don't have to do a lot. I mean, I have to go through edits, of course, but they're cohesive. Like the story is there. It's very like it's all there. But with like fantasy and science fiction and those type of things, I like to put it in Scrivener. I go all out. I've got a background that I'll have when I go into composition mode. So it's black and I've got my fun like pictures on the side to like inspire me and like get my brain in the right space. I've got a playlist that I have to do. And then I'll have my like outline is on one side. And then oftentimes I have a full glossary of terms and a
mm,
glossary of places because I'm like, wait, where is this place? And I had to create my own map on Photoshop just so that I can see. I have to see the galaxy because they're
Mhm.
going this place. Well, they have to go around the sun and like, I mean, it's fake science. It's not, we're not writing hard sci-fi here. But it's more of the vein of like Star Trek, that type of thing where it's that fantasy science fiction element. So I would
mhm,
say that would be like those documents are kind of my, I guess, virtual binder that I can
Mhm.
go back to. I transfer all of those to every new iteration basically. If it's book 1, book 2, like a side series or whatever, that will kind of travel with me. And the fun thing is that like I would say most of my worlds are intertwined even if you wouldn't really know it. So I know it, but and so in my mind, a lot of the same terms that I've created will transfer through all of my science fiction. And I think it just helps to keep it cohesive because then you're not
mhm,
having to learn like I created, it's not really. I call the glass on the ships, it's called SIO glass. So SIO hyphen glass. That's just what I mean. There's stuff that I don't need to go into about why I called it that, but that will always be glass in my series, whatever it is, and it just makes it easier. So those
mhm,
things though, I have to check my own glossary. I'm like, how did I capitalize that? What did I say? My editor's been great to like help me keep that consistent. But yeah, that would be where I keep all of it. So if I back it up, but you never know. I should probably print it out or something somewhere. I guess it is in my book, but
Yeah, the glossary of terms was really useful.
okay.
I felt like I liked that. I mean, it
Mhm.
was at the end, but it was still neat to go back through and, like, reread all those. I was like, "Yeah, yeah, I got that. I figured that out. I understood that." Because
Mhm.
and that's another thing, and I think we talked about this a little while ago, but it was with horse jargon. We were talking
Mhm.
about and it's similar, right? Because it's a very only certain people understand it, and so you have to make sure that it's understandable in context, because you don't want to go defining everything all
Mm-hmm.
the time. Or, if you can get it by with one or two words, it's fine. But if you have to go through this huge long explanation, then that
Yeah.
takes away from the story. And
Mm-hmm.
so, anytime you have that kind of thing, and I like fantasy, I write fantasy too. So I understand exactly what you're saying. And it's just making those terms accessible can be
Mm-hmm.
a challenge.
Well, yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because this is something that I may be shooting myself in the foot, or maybe feel like I did, because one good example would be the creatures, the animals. So I think when you're writing science fiction, you can kind of take it in a couple of directions. You can have that tie to old Earth, which I feel like a lot of sci-fi people will refer back to, where the characters know their roots are from Earth or something like that. It makes it more accessible to a reader, but at the same time, it's like, okay, but it's science fiction. How far out are we talking? And I'm not good with like 200 years, 500 years, whatever. It's just in the future. So I had to decide, okay, if I create fictional animals, do I also have like Earth animals? Because if I'm talking, I think I created something that's called a Leonar, and it's like a big cat is what I'm going to say, but I could not define it as a big cat, because then
Right.
I'm using a term that my characters wouldn't actually know in their daily life, because I'm kind of saying it's so far distant from Earth. It's not like Earth things aren't there, but it's just not the same. It's hard to explain. But that has been probably the biggest challenge, is to like, okay, if there's a whale, like what do I call it? A big aquatic thing, like, all those things. So I kind of wish that I hadn't have made it such, like, if I would have referenced like, oh, it looked like a cat from old Earth or something, it would have been easier, and I think readers would understand a little more. But as you're talking about description, going into things being like, okay, so if I was to describe a snake without just saying snake, I'd be like, well, it slithers on the ground. It's elongated body. It has scales, that type of thing. You think snake. And so that is really hard. And I'm kind of like, man, I should have just made it easier on myself. But to make something that was understandable enough for like my friends who are maybe just romance readers, and they're like, well, I want to read your book to support you. And I'm like, well, good luck. There are going to be some things that may not make sense to you, but push through. But yeah.
Because
I
I think
love the
there,
animals.
yeah, I was about to say the animals do, and I'm the non-science fiction person, which I think that's now a fallacy as we're moving.
Well, you've read
Probably.
it. So.
It is because I grew up, I loved Star Trek and I
Mhm.
loved Star Wars, and I will watch them all. And I think I'm more of a, the sci-fi fantasy person more than I realized, because I really, really loved this book and can't wait for the next one. And as we talk about in our review, the thing I did like though is that, okay, you've got the people, you've got the setting in space, and you've got the different animals and the different worlds, but yet what your characters are feeling and what they're going through. There's still that relatable
Yeah.
element of the emotional side of the
Mhm.
story. And so it I don't know, it does makes it relatable. I just said that, but
Mhm.
the
Yeah.
relatable part,
Yeah.
I
you
think
know,
it's fun though to not necessarily know what animal it is, or if it's completely different, like the
Mhm.
six-legged
Mhm.
thing.
Yeah.
I don't remember any of the names of the things, but I remembered
Yeah.
them, like
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
you
What
described
your
them, and it's
brain
like,
creates. Yeah.
yeah, and it's like,
Mhm.
okay, it's okay to be completely different, and have something that's not Earth related. I mean, you're still
Mhm.
gonna create a picture in your head of
Mhm.
what you think this thing is. Of course, once the movie comes out, that'll just ruin it all. But
Yeah, right. I
but,
mean, from your lips to God's ears. No, just kidding. But no,
hey, you
yeah, and
never know.
that's part of it, right? Is that it's that kind of the bridge. And it's funny that you would say that, well, Rebecca, but there's both of you. So Rebecca times two. But just I had a lot of people tell me like, oh, I loved the characters. I loved how character driven it was. And I was like, wait, I am a plot first person.
Oh,
Well, I told myself I was. And then the more I thought about it, I was like, well, I would like to say I'm both. And I think every writer needs to be. You have to care about your plot and your characters at the same
mhm.
time. It can't just be one or the other, because I don't think that makes a great story. But what you're saying makes sense, because at the end of the day, their story is what propels the plot. And yes, I picked out things. I was like, oh, this is going to be fun. And I need them to, face some danger. I need this to happen and that to happen and whatnot. But at the end of the day, it comes down to like who they are as a couple. And that's by heart, as I just love romance. I love sweet romance. So I was like, how could I tell a fun, sweet romance with some adventure, weird animals, and put it in space?
You just did, and Tally and
Yes.
Renner are both very they're fun characters, and I picture Renner as this soldier, and everything by the book, and Tally to me is very, or is that how you say her name,
Yeah.
by the way?
Hmm.
Tally
Yep.
is very almost ethereal to me.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
but boy, does she grow. Her character arc through this book is, I just love that she's finding her own strength
Yeah.
and her own ways. So they were very relatable,
Mhm.
but my favorite character besides Dot was Leaf too. That
Yes,
was a
that's
fun
like everybody's saying that.
no, but when you introduced him, I went, "Oh, he's going to be
Oh,
something."
yeah. Well, and it's funny because I had this conversation with my the audiobook, one of the audiobook narrators, and it's so funny because he had done one version of him. Now, I mean, it's not really a spoiler, because I think I've told people like Leaf features very heavily in the next book. And which is like a lot of pressure, because everybody's like, I love him. And I'm like, I don't even know if I remember him. And like, I mean, I do, but like who he is in the second book is, when you get your own perspective, right? You start to see more of who he really, I mean, you see who he really is in the book, obviously, but there's a lot of smoke and mirrors, right? And
Yeah,
so, do you
he's
know what I'm saying?
yeah,
Yeah, I feel like you're like,
completely.
I get it.
Yeah, we get it.
Yeah, and so it's that tension of like, okay, how do I stay true to his character, that who he's been in book one, but also let him be his own character, because he's got more to say, and he's a really
Oh
interesting
yeah.
character. But anyways, I had this conversation with my narrator, and I was like, I think he needs a little something more, because we really wanted to nail his voice for book two. So, book
Mhm.
one, book two, whatever. And so he was like, "What, like a little more Han Solo?" And I was like, yes, more Han Solo. So I am in the process of editing through the audio. So like I'm not there yet. But anyways, I think it's that kind of character. I think that he's just like a bit of a rogue, but he's like really charming at heart. So yeah,
Mhm.
it's fun. He's a good character.
Rebecca called it.
Oh
She
yeah.
she called it. Yeah, we were talking about it before we got on with you, and we were both talking about Leaf, and I said Indiana Jones, and she said no, it's Han
Yes.
Solo, and I'm like, well,
Yes. Yeah.
they're basically the same
It's
idea,
Harrison
right? One's
Ford.
in space,
It is.
one's on
It
the
is.
ground, but
Yeah.
yeah, that we both said that. So yes,
Hmm.
exactly. That
Hmm.
that will be perfect, that
Hmm.
kind of sound for him because
Yeah.
he's just and yeah, he's totally like he's out there and not at the same time. He's very
Hmm.
outgoing and funny and all of that, but there's so
Hmm.
much more. It's so obvious that there's so much
Hmm.
more. And your epilogue was epic, by the way.
That's always
Um,
fun. I remember like writing it and being like, like people are gonna either be they're gonna love it or they're gonna hate it, or maybe a little bit of both. But I had to
well,
leave
it's
somewhere.
it's
A little
definitely a
cliffhanger.
yeah.
Well, okay, but I tell people, because they're like, "Oh, I hate cliffhangers," and I get it. I don't
But
love them when you're totally left hanging, like completely. But I always like to say, like, I did pretty well wrap a lot of
yes,
things up for
Oh,
like
you
yes,
Tally
did.
and Renner's story, and I
yes,
wanted to do that
yes.
because I knew at the onset that. So one of my favorite series, which definitely was an inspiration for this, and I've read it like years ago, and it's actually right up there behind my fingers. You can kind of see it, but
I like that.
is the
Right.
yeah, there is the Starbound trilogy. And I just loved that it's Megan Spooner and Amy Kaufman are the authors, and they did a romance for each book, and yet an overarching plot. And I knew when I wrote this story, I was like, that's exactly what I want, because I really want them to be their to have their own romance, because I kind of I like a trilogy that like makes the romance spread, but at the same time, I think you can kind of fall into that trap of, well, you've got to break them up in book 2, and then you've got to have them go through everything, and the kitchen sink in book 3 so that their love is worth it. And which is totally fine. And I love series like that, but I don't necessarily enjoy writing that, or at least I didn't see their story for this, like the whole
Mhm.
span. So they will be in it, and they're definitely part of the rest of the series from this book 1 characters. But I really wanted to kind of show a different aspect, which has become very challenging because that means I've got a lot of points of view in this series. But
Yeah.
hey, why not, right? Why not?
I mean, I did like that I liked the fact that they weren't broken up at the end, because
Mhm.
that is one of the things that, you're right, when you have a trilogy, like, they tend to not be together at the end,
Yeah. Mhm.
and it's challenging, and because I think the expectation is that if it's a romance and they're gonna be the characters all the way through, they can't actually be together until the
Mhm.
very 3rd book, but I'm not writing mine like that, so we'll see
Mhm.
how that goes, but,
Yeah. Yeah.
but
And I think you could totally make it work that way too. I just think for me going into it too, I wanted to show, and I mean I have a lot of it planned out in my head, but I don't have the end, I would say. Which I'm not worried about. I have ideas. But in writing like it, because I'm working on book 2 right now, I think in seeing that and not having to worry about them, like yes, they're still playing a part in the book because
Mhm,
of things. I don't want to do any spoilers, but they're still
Mhm.
playing a part in things, but not to the extent of like, oh, if we don't hear from them in a certain amount of chapters, you're not wondering, are they, is their romance broken? It's like, nope, don't worry about that. Well, probably don't worry about them. I don't know. Who knows what could happen? But I'm not saying that as like no spoilers. I don't even know for myself. It's not a spoiler. But that is something that I think is like really important. And I give you the next romance so you can think about that, while you're in
Yeah.
that part of the book. So that was saying a lot without saying much, but
Actually not, because we're big on trying not to give spoilers when we do the
yeah,
reviews. It's hard sometimes.
that's good.
And like
It
this,
is.
maybe it's not a cliffhanger, but it's more a teaser because the story
Mhm.
with
Yes.
Renner and Tally is complete, and you are kind of teasing, well, Leaf is going to
Mhm.
take off and into
Mhm.
the second book, and so that was real exciting actually
Yeah.
because it makes me totally want to pick up the second book, and I wasn't
Oh, yeah.
angry at
Oh, I'm
some people
excited,
don't
and
like that. So
I
it's a
just I
teaser.
want to like I know I want to talk about things I can't talk about, but I'm excited because I do enjoy doing that, and I won't say that I won't do that again. At least in like giving you that kind of gasp moment at the end. I think it's
Mhm.
really fun.
Mhm.
Yes, it can be cruel, but I try not to be cruel with it. But there is another character who will appear in this next book. And so I assume that that will be something that might happen again. But I promise to like fulfill it. People get mad at me because they're like, but I have to wait a year. And I'm like, I know, but I have all these other things I have to do. So,
Well,
well,
yeah, and you're super busy, but also, I mean, isn't that the way TV always did it for us? Or, even the movies when
Yes.
you have a more
Yes.
than
Mhm,
one, right? You have to wait a long time in between, and that's that teaser that keeps people talking
that's
about
true.
the story. That's where that interest level is still it keeps stays high. I wanted to talk about your Kickstarter campaign a little
Mhm.
bit because I know that's how you funded this book, and I know I just read last night, and I just finished this book really not very long ago, a while ago, but not that long ago.
Yeah.
So it was very interesting, to read what you put in the end about the Kickstarter campaign. So I just wanted, and for those, for
Mhm.
people who aren't familiar with that, maybe explain a little bit about what that is and what made you choose to do it that way.
Oh, absolutely. So Kickstarter is basically like a crowdfunding platform where you're able to put out a project, and it's not books usually. I mean, oftentimes it's like board games or product ideas, something new that you really think that, an audience will like and want to support, but maybe you need the funds to make it happen. And I think it's only more recently within the last few years that Kickstarter has really shot up for authors to be like a viable platform for them to raise money to support their books, which I absolutely love. Um, obviously, if you're going independent. If you're going traditional, it's different. You don't need that kind of funding. But for me, and I'll touch just a little bit on kind of what I said in that, and I've spoken on this in multiple podcasts, but I wrote Suspended in the Stars on my blog, at least the first 50,000 words of it. So the first half in the month of August 2020. And I was challenged by my co-podcasting host, Kristen Crum, and she's like, hey, let's write a book on our blogs in a month. And so she was writing and I was writing. And it was just so fun. And I had so many people being like, I can't wait for tomorrow. Like, I can't wait for what's next. Like, what's going to happen. And I mean, if you're talking about kind of cliffhanger endings per chapter, which we know is a really great thing because that's what keeps our readers reading, I was trying to do that with every single episode, if you will, chapter or whatnot that I posted. It was just like, ooh, what could I leave them that makes them want to come back tomorrow? So when I finished that, everybody was like, how do I get this book? Like, I made it to where it was a satisfying-ish ending, but it was for sure not the end of the story. So I did have to change a few things in order to actually write the rest of the book. But through that, I always had in the back of my mind, there are people that want this book. Like, I know that they do. I had so many people, like, throughout the years before it was ever published, say, when is this going to be a thing? I want to read it. Like, when can I get it? So I finished writing it, smoothed it all out, did my self edits and whatnot, and then had my agent send it out to the general market just because while I'm a Christian, I wouldn't say that it's a Christian fiction book. It is clean. There's no spice, no swearing, nothing like that. But I wanted it to just appeal widely to any teen because I love teens and I want them to have like books that show characters who change and characters who care about the right things, like the light, winning over darkness, basically. So we sent it out to a ton of people, and honestly, I got a lot of great responses, but nobody was willing to take a risk on it because, I mean, this is kind of, I do my little hand thing again. This is like my shelf of science fiction, and there's just not a lot of it in the young adult world. So it's a gamble if you're not an established author. And I knew that going in, but I figured why not try? So finally, back to Kickstarter. We got pretty much, I think, our last no again. Like, everybody said the story was really good. They really liked it, but it just wasn't for, like, I'm not the editor for this, that type of thing. So I started thinking about it, reached out to my agent and said, I think I want to take this to Kickstarter. One of my clients, a book design client, who is also my friend, had just done her Kickstarter and she raised $8,000, more than that, for her first book. And I had designed the cover and done her graphics for her. And she just it was so fun, right? Watching her just like progress and seeing the numbers go up and backing her and all that. It was super fun. So I figured, this might actually work for me. I can do the graphics. I do formatting and stuff as like a side part of my graphic design business. So I had all the skills I needed minus editing, which I hired out to get this book into shape. I work for publishers, so like I know how to do the dust jackets and how to do all those different things. So I asked her, my agent, and she said, we're good. You can do what you want to do with it, type of thing. So I put it on Kickstarter. I did not realize how much work it was going to be. I mean, I knew, but I didn't really know. It was March of 2023, and the campaign ran like, gosh, I don't even know, 20 something days, over 20 days. And what you do is you establish kind of packages, tiers, however you want to call them, of what you're offering. So I had a limited edition version of Suspended in the Stars that, for me, I said, I'm not going to sell this anywhere outside of Kickstarter. You will not be able to purchase this hardcover with this, stamped cover and like all the stuff. It will not be available anywhere else. So this is your chance to get it. But I also offered paperbacks that would be widely available, ebooks, audiobook, things like that, and swag, just because I create it for my shop. And so it was easy. And anybody. And basically I just like shouted to the world and said, hey, who wants to buy this book? And all of that is happening before it's actually finished. So at least a finished product. So I mean, my editor had already sent me back, I think, my edits, and I had to go through those, format all those things, design the cover, work with the press, that type of stuff, like a printing press. But all of that was based on where am I going to fund? I think my original goal was $2,000, and that would get me, you know, I had a plan A and a plan B of printers and how I was going to run with that. That was my logical husband's mind helping me go through all the numbers and stuff. And then we ended up raising over $10,000, which was totally not something I thought was going to happen. I was like shocked. But that allowed me to buy paperback copies like excess so I can sell them on my own. It allowed me to buy the, you know, nice, beautiful versions of limited editions, all of that, and fulfill those orders. So it was a wild ride, but I don't know. Yeah. What, do you have any questions? Because I don't know. I don't know what areas to go into, I guess.
So people buy the different tiers, which I've seen this before. Becky Wade did a Kickstarter
Oh yeah.
a year ago for Memory House.
Her
I think is
audiobook.
the
Yeah.
yeah. And so she offered different packages of, like you said, the limited edition books that are just for them, and the swag and stuff. And so that's what people are buying, and that's how you raise your money, and you just fulfill those orders with
Yeah.
that
So
money. And then
yeah, the graphics is a big part of it. I mean, there are probably some campaigns that already have the books finished or examples of them done, but a lot of them are done kind of on, here's a digital spec, basically, whatever, of what this will look like. So I kind of made mine, oh, you know, the pages will look like this, the cover will look like this. The cover was, you know, important to have that done early on, and that helped a lot because I think people really liked it. So with that, you're basically grouping things by how I tried to think of it as like, because I've backed a number of Kickstarters myself, and I did that before I even thought about doing my own. I had backed several in the past and then did more along the way because you just want to support people and their dreams, you know, it's like this is their passion. So with that, I tried to think like, okay, we might have like someone who wants to, everybody's getting the ebook anyways, just because that's like, you know, in each, I think every tier had the ebook. But if you get the audiobook, well, you're also getting the ebook. And if you getting the paperback, well, you're also getting the ebook, and maybe you want to add on the audiobook, that type of thing. So it's hard to kind of narrow it down because you could just do like, right, endless number of combinations. But I tried to keep it logical. I tried to keep it with regards to price, and things will be higher on Kickstarter. It's just going to be more expensive, but most people, especially people who are very familiar with Kickstarter and have been on it and backed a ton, will say, oh, I expect to be paying, you know, maybe like $15-20 for a paperback because I'm paying for someone's dream, right? You're paying to support them, plus you're getting a product in reciprocation for that. So it's kind of a mindset shift, I think, for some people, because, you know, that's also why I released it wide in November. So it came out in March. Well, the Kickstarter was in March. Everybody got their books sometime after that. I forget when I sent them out. At least the ebook was pretty early. And then I release it wide so that anybody else can still purchase it. They just can't get those like special covers and stuff. So with that, you're going to also get the readers then who are just like, I don't really want to support a Kickstarter. It seems too expensive or whatever. Well, then you can offer them something later as well. So.
Well, interesting. It is a whole new world these days, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah, to do that. Okay. So you are currently, so we don't keep everyone too long here, you're currently working on book 2, which is it still Falling Through the Black? Is that still the title?
Yes.
And are you working on anything else that we should know about with all your many hats?
Yeah. So in the realm of science fiction and fantasy, yes. So I run a Patreon page, which is kind of like it's like a paywall basically, where all the content behind it, you can choose a level that you want to support someone and in their creative endeavors, not just like random, like, oh, support me to live my life. But through that, I'm actually going to be starting serial fiction, which I'm super excited about. So it's very similar to what I did with Suspended in the Stars, just not daily because that's a little bit much. Right now, I'm committed to releasing I'm calling them like episodes, but I don't know if that will stick. But an episode a week for a certain amount of time. I'd initially said like in quarters, but I might actually do it longer depending on the story. It's a working title. It's called Dragons in Space, which is obviously not the title, but I don't have a title for it. So that's what I'm calling it. And it literally is that. It's kind of, because Fourth Wing is very popular in like the secular realm right now. It has quite a bit of language in it and very adult situations. So it is not for every reader. But because it's such a like popular craze right now, dragons are really, cool. And I have had a dragons in space idea for like years now. So I'm just going to go ahead and go for it. It's a little like Fourth Wing, like a very clean Fourth Wing meets Lord of the Rings and space. I don't know. It's going to be its own thing, a little Ender's Game, I think, in there. So it'll be fun. But anyways, I'm working on that. It'll be kind of released weekly. The first episode will totally be free, so everybody can like read it. If they see that something that they like, they can pay to read if they want, or maybe wait when it's all done and pay for a month and read it all. I don't care. But that is really fun. And I think that will keep me creating on one side of my brain, because it will not be finished. Like it's this kind of idea of writing something, reading through it once and posting it, which is a little scary, but I think it keeps my mind fresh. It keeps me excited about story. So I'm going to do that. And then I also have several other books that are going to be for like my other pen names and things like that. So it'll be probably a busy year, but we'll see what actually gets written. There are things I'm committed to, but the rest is like up in the air.
In other words, folks, she has a lot coming. Just keep an eye out for her.
Yeah. And then, the Kickstarter is in March too. So I will be releasing the Kickstarter for book 2 in March. You will be able to purchase some of the special edition hardcovers from book 1, but I only have a limited number, that type of thing. But then everything will be mostly focused on book 2, which is exciting. So I don't know what to expect, quite honestly. You would hope that you would fund around the same or more, just because the same people would be coming back. But I'm sure I've lost readers, and hopefully I'll have gained some too. So we'll see what happens, right? But yeah.
Did I do that?
Yeah. I'm a fan too. I love it. I had only read, I think, a couple of your stories from other hats, other names before, and but this is right up my alley anyways.
Oh,
so
cool.
I really loved it, and yeah, it's a really good story, and it has all the things. I think I wrote a review for it that said it was kind of like romantic suspense in space.
I can see that, which works because like I do write romantic suspense.
I know.
Well, I think I went into it thinking like, and it was very freeing, right? And I think that's another thing why I like this like dragons in space ideas, because it's all free. Like I can write however I want. Nobody's telling me this, that, the other. And with Suspended in the Stars, I was like, well, I love action. I love Indiana Jones. I obviously love Star Wars, Star Trek. Like, so what does that look like? Well, there you go.
There you go.
It is what it is.
I think you nailed it.
Thank you.
So for your Kickstarter, should they go to eahcreative.com to find
there
out
will
more?
Be information up there when I update my website. Yeah, so that's kind of my catch-all for my EA Hendryx pen name. It's got my design. It is my design website and my photography, but it also has my writing on that side of it and my podcast stuff, just so that it's all in one place. And then my other pen name stuff is Emily Haney is my actual name. I write under that and stuff. So that's a whole nother website. But yeah, I think that would probably be the easiest. You can also go to Kickstarter and you can find Suspended in the Stars, because they keep every campaign. Obviously it's not editable or anything like that, but it's up there. I will hopefully soon have the landing page for the next Kickstarter up, where you can click to kind of like follow type of thing, so that when it goes live, you'll be notified. I just haven't done that yet, so I need to do that. But yes, it will be up on EAH Creative at some point soon.
Something to look forward to. All right. Why don't we wrap this up? And I want to wrap this up talking about your life verse for your writing verse, which is First
Mhm.
Corinthians. You want to share that with
Mhm.
us?
Yeah, absolutely. So whatever you do, whether you eat or drink, do it all unto the Lord. And I really do believe that. I believe that whether I'm taking a photograph and hopefully making people smile, or whether I am designing a cover for someone, especially because like that's like your baby, right? Your book is going out there and you want to package it really well. Or whether I'm writing for people to read or just because I love to write. I try to do all of those things for the Lord, first and foremost, because I think if I do them for anything else, then, wrong motives, I think I'm going to feel cheated, because of whatever outcome I hope for, I guess, if I can say it like that. But instead, I try to think like, as long as I do this for the Lord, whatever happens with it, whether it's something huge, something small, or nothing at all, I've still done it to Him, which I think is most important.
And I think that's a fabulous way to close this out. So the book we've been talking about a lot is Suspended in the Stars, under the name of EA Hendryx, Hendryx. So different spelling there, and we'll put the website up here so people can find you. And Emily, we are so appreciative of your time today. It's been a really fun conversation and a really fun book to read, even for those who don't always read science
I
fiction.
like to hear
Really
that.
enjoyed it, truthfully.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
So we're glad you're here. All right, next month we're gonna do something a little bit different. We're going back to a Western, historical Western with Paula Peckham, who's a fourth, fifth, sixth generation Texan. I don't know how deep her roots are here in Texas. The book is called Protected. And again, we'll be visiting with Paula in April. But meanwhile, we were glad you were here. And Emily, we were glad you were here today. And we look forward to seeing everyone next time.
Bye.